Hello, friends, and welcome to What the Fringe, the podcast dedicated to all things Fringe theater. I'm your host, Lauren Hance. Each week, I visit with a Fringe artist to hear all about their endeavors and gain insight into their process. This week, I'm visiting with Charlaina Thompson of Yellow Brick Theatre, whose current show is Dust. England, 2020. Penderfield's Hospital, lockdown, 2:20 a.m. A man fights with each breath to make it home to Dot. In his isolated morphine-fueled delirium, we witness a frail man reliving his fragmented past. A boxer, a soldier, a boilermaker, and a miner dancing around the ring with Lady Luck as he fights to win. But is it fate or our will to survive that decides when we return to Dust? Dust is one man's unforgettable journey examining generational trauma, resilience, and survival against the backdrop of post-World War II England. Dust is dedicated to the servicemen who fought for their country and the 7 men who tragically died in the Lofthouse Colliery disaster of 1973, and every miner who lived their lives in darkness so we could live in the light. Based on a true story and infused with northern grit, humor, and soul.
People can take away your money, people can take away your home, but they can never take away your education and experiences. And for me, art does that. When people come to see a show I've written, it's a moment in time. It's something so special that the people in that room share. And I think that's ultimately why I love theatre so much, because it's not Netflix, it's not Instagram, it's not something you can scroll by. When you're in that room together, you are in it, and you're in it from the start to the end, and you may love it or hate it, but you're together on that journey. And human connection, human spirit, resilience, storytelling is just at the essence of everything I love to do and want to do forever.
Charlaina Thompson is an award-winning playwright and producer and the creative director of Yellow Brick Theatre. Born in Sydney, Yorkshire bred, and now proudly Adelaide-based, she burst onto the scene with Dust, the sold-out hit that won the 2025 Adelaide Fringe In Space Award for Best Original Work by a South Australian artist. A former high school performing arts educator with more than a decade of youth theatre credits as a writer, director, and producer, Charlaina channels her expertise into bold, new, and collaborative storytelling that champions untold voices. Building on that momentum, she is developing 2 new play scripts as part of a trilogy and will take Dust interstate and overseas in 2026 and beyond. Charlaina is most excited about future collaborations with visionary presenters, co-producers, and creative partners who share her belief in theater's intimate power to connect communities through socially resonant storytelling. Charlaina, welcome to What the Fringe.
Wow, thank you for that amazing introduction. I'm so happy to be with you today, Lauren. You almost made me very emotional. I haven't really had that read back to me in such a beautiful way.
Well, thank you. You wrote a beautiful show. So there you go. Well, I'm so excited to have you on. So we got connected. I always stalk everybody. I always joke about that. My listeners know, but not in a creepy way. But like as soon as the Adelaide Fringe Fund Awards came out, because I got one of those as well. And so I went on, I was like, who's all the shows? Where are all the shows? I want to see what they are. And your image like, boom, popped. And I was like, this show, what is this show? Like it really drew me in. And then just also getting connected through Joanne Hartstone. And I was like, yeah, let's get this show on the program. And so here we are. Yay.
I'm so happy to be here. Yeah, that photo was actually taken at Port Adelaide, which is a very industrial town in Adelaide. So lots of old industrial buildings. And a close friend of mine actually took that as a random shot. And it was the first shot we did, and it just captured the essence of the whole show. It was a complete fluke, but it was the winning shot. And we did many other shots afterwards, but I was like, this is it. This is the one that needs to convey the story. And so, yeah, it was kind of incredible that we got it so quickly.
Isn't that funny? Did you know when you caught it, or like, did you see it on the camera, or just afterwards you were like, number one, that's it. Don't need to look at anything else.
Well, the photograph is of Craig, who's the performer, and he is an incredible tour de force on stage. He just has the audience eating out of the palm of his hand. He takes the audience on such a journey, an emotional roller coaster. And just that image, he was in the zone and we clicked and it just captured everything about the entire performance. And we were like, it's it. We did it.
That's beautiful. I mean, I always tell, especially if we have like newer Fringers listening, that hero image or key image, whatever you want to call it, is so important. I mean, I was sold on the show on the image.
Yeah, well, that's so true. A lot of people have said we didn't even get to the copy before we bought tickets. They said we were hooked. Those eyes just really, feed into his soul, and they say so much, like the power of the picture.
Yeah, and it's the picture, and then you see the word dust, and there's something, because it's like gritty, and there's just something really, really beautiful about just like the combination of all of those things. So
there is a funny story that maybe I should tell you that happened here. So we got to Port Adelaide, did the photo shoot, and we'd used, obviously being a theatre teacher, had some makeup ready to go just to obviously set the tone. And we don't actually use any makeup at all in the performance. And the power is just through his storytelling. But for the image, we just wanted to convey a little bit more. And we did a bit of the stage makeup, and I went, it just doesn't look authentic. It just doesn't look real. So I pretty much grabbed as much dirt from the ground as I could, smeared it all over his face, and I said, it's a good job we've got a good relationship. And that was the first shot we took. So yeah, lucky that he'd trust me.
Yeah, perfection.
So we really can say it's grit and soil, and it comes through in that shot.
It sure does. It sure does. Well, I want to talk about that show, but we're going to put that on the shelf for just a minute. And I want to talk about you as an artist. I love that you included in your background that you were born in Sydney, Yorkshire bred, and now you're back in Australia, in Adelaide. How would you say that kind of that world hopping and growing up in two different places has shaped you as an artist?
It's infiltrated. It's part of my DNA. I just sort of hit my equinox where I'd lived as long in Australia as I did in the UK. But definitely I was raised and shaped, with that northern grit and determination and hard work from a working class background. And my family were all in mining. And so it was just part of the conversation at the dinner table. Things obviously got quite heated, often very political. My great grandfather won an award from the King Edward, and he was presented that, and it was just an incredible life to live, where every day when you went to work you didn't know if you would come home again. And I think people forget that about the mining industry, is that you constantly lived in fear for your loved ones. And it wasn't just your father or your brother or your grandfather, it was the next door neighbor, it was a whole community. And when things happened, it was a tidal effect through the whole community. Everybody knew everybody. It was close families, close units. And the story that we do tell in Dust is about when disaster does strike and the impacts of that over generations that went before, but also afterwards. Yeah, it's a beautiful story, and it's about my grandfather. It's about the actor's grandfather. It's based on a true story. My time in England has definitely shaped the storytelling I want to tell, to be authentic. And living now in Australia, I have 2 children. I have a beautiful husband. And so I've really lived in 2 worlds. And it's wonderful to have distance and perspective when you want to go back and tell a story that's from your hometown, because you do get to step out a little bit and observe from the outside in. And when I went back in 2023 to unfortunately bury my aunt, who was much beloved, it really made me think about the stories and the conversations I'll never get to have with her again, and really made me lean into, what do I remember? What's really important things from my childhood growing up that I want to tell, and the stories I want to keep alive. And that kind of fueled my passion to want to write Dust, the trilogy, but also continue as an artist to tell stories that may be forgotten if we don't take the time to share them.
That's really beautiful. So you grew up in a mining town. How did you get into the arts? If, you've got these like gritty northerners.
Lauren, how much time do we have?
Were you the weird kid, the little artsy one that was like playing with flowers? Or
I'm still the weird kid, did, Lauren. That hasn't changed at all. My story was that I came from a family, my great grandfather was actually the mayor of our town for a while, and he'd worked his way up through the mining industry, got into politics. So in terms of a family, we were seen as quite, affluent within our local community. But unfortunately, by the time I was 13, my nana had died, my grandfather had died, my mother passed away to cancer, and I was left an orphan. And I went into foster care and finished my schooling in a very challenging and turbulent environment. So I kind of grew up in this very idyllic setting until I was 12, and then that dramatically changed, so much so that on my 18th birthday I was kicked out on the street. I was homeless. And so art for me has always been a way to connect with people and to have joy in your life. Like even when I was going through difficult times in foster care, I could get on that stage at school. I could become someone else. I could find an essence of connecting with other people on an equal playing field. So I think it's always been a part of who I am. It's why I love to tell stories. And I was a passionate drama teacher. My grandfather said to me once, people can take away your money, people can take away your home, but they can never take away your education and experiences. And for me, art does that. When people come to see a show I've written, it's a moment in time. It's something so special that the people in that room share. And I think that's ultimately why I love theatre so much, because it's not Netflix, it's not Instagram, it's not something you can scroll by. When you're in that room together, you are in it, and you're in it from the start to the end, and you may love it or hate it, but you're together on that journey. And human connection, human spirit, resilience, storytelling is just at the essence of everything I love to do and want to do forever.
Wow. That's so interesting, just how all of that impacts you as an artist. And I can see your life being really shaped by that and putting you into the arts, just because of how you grew up and what you experienced. And that's really cool.
I do have a memory. I remember when my mum did pass away, I kind of dealt with it in a way that I saw my life as chapters, and that as chapters were ending, some chapters are more painful than others. There's a journey to go on, but you have to keep going, even when there's the times that you want to give up or things are really difficult. And I've had many of those, I think, in my life. Sometimes the way I dealt with things was to take myself out of a situation and kind of be the outside looking in and going, if this is a really difficult time and it's a story and a narrative, how do I get through it? What is the journey? And I feel that that's maybe how I started to tell myself my own story, is that you've got to keep going. There's always another chapter. We can turn that page. And I think I've always maybe had that creative mind of other stories and stories shared help other people get through their own challenging journeys, but with heart and warmth and humor, because along the way, there's a lot of laughter, there's a lot of tears. But with people together, you can get through anything.
I'm going to have a lot to think about tonight, just thinking on all of these things you said. It's packed with so much wisdom and beauty and joy in life, even in the suffering. So I'm very excited to see the show and how that comes out.
It seems strange now, but I woke up one morning and I just really wanted to tell this story. And Craig had spoken with his father, who'd sent me a few little video kind of tapes and just a few little notes. Not a lot, but I was drawing on a lot of my own experience of growing up in a mining town. But dust fell in me to write, and I wrote it within 4 weeks. And I was working full time, and each Friday Craig would turn up at my house and he'd read a few pages and he'd go, "Oh, I just want to keep reading." And we'd laugh and we'd cry and we'd share childhood memories, and we just felt like electric, like we were onto something so special. And the whole process, the whole journey was just enjoyable because it felt so meaningful. And it's probably been one of the best experiences I've ever had, and it just has grown. And we didn't know, we thought we had something really beautiful and we were enjoying the journey, but until it actually went on stage, and that was at Adelaide Fringe last year, we had no idea if anybody was going to get anything from it, enjoy it? Were we just two artists in a room alone, just playing around and not knowing what was going to happen? But the impact of that first show gives me goose pimples, because people came out and hugged me in these meaningful hugs, and just, oh, it was just breathtaking. And yeah, it just was transformative, and I can't wait. A huge goal for Craig and I would be to take it home to Wakefield, to take it home to Yorkshire. And I can cry thinking about that moment, because it would be so meaningful to take it back to the community of which it was written and written for. I'll try not to get emotional, but I do get emotional thinking about that.
That's really exciting. And now Craig also is connected. So you guys are connected to this mining town and the Lofthouse Colliery disaster. How did you guys, one, connect?
It's another great story, Lauren. Craig is as Yorkshire as they come. So I can go in and out of it. So if I go back home to Yorkshire, it's like, all right, love, book it and plug, great, fantastic, brill, and I'll go into my Yorkshire. But I was raised and had elocution lessons. So it's like 5 flying Frenchmen flying fashions to France, you know, school drama teacher, and learn how to speak a little bit more high RP. But yeah, when I go back home, I'm straight into the Yorkshire accent. But Craig came over and he did a wonderful show called Heroin for Breakfast. This was in the Adelaide Fringe, 2014. So we're going back a little bit there, Lauren, showing our age a little bit. But there's an incredible writer who I love, Phil Stokes, who did Jesus, Jane and Me, that you might have heard of, just did Shell Shock to Adelaide Fringe. And the show, when I watched Craig, that's when I met Craig for the first time, seeing in that production. And I was the audience member talking to him after the show at Holden Street Theatres, and just gushing and just blown away by his performance, the artistry of the script. It was just one of the best things I've ever seen. And Craig was living in England, but I helped him. I actually worked for an agent working with youth theatre, and I said, if you come out, I think I can get you work. And then he ended up emigrating to Australia, and so we built a friendship just from seeing that one Fringe show. So Fringe is transformational. Just by chatting to him after the show, his whole trajectory of life went full circle, and we were obviously meant to meet. And then fast forward 12 years later, we've worked on different projects, mainly in the youth theatre space, but we met at Adelaide Fringe. We just went to see a show together, and we started chatting afterwards, and we said, hey, maybe we should collaborate. Our ancestors were in mining, maybe we should join forces on this. And that's how Dust was born, and all through our love of theatre, love of Fringe, and just people and community getting together. And this has taken on a life of its own, but it was really 14 years in the making.
That is the coolest, fringiest story. It's so delicious. I love that. You were mentioning how you wrote the show, and I'm kind of curious to hear more about that and how you and Craig collaborated on that. Sounds like you did a lot of the heavy lifting with the writing, but like, was there some devising, or was there exchange of stories to kind of like shape it?
One thing that was so incredibly beautiful, and if this was the only thing that came out of it, it would have been worth the whole process, is that Craig is close with his father, and hopefully he's okay with me saying this, but he said that they'd never really talked about those times. They'd never really talked about their grandfather. They'd never really talked about their relationship. They hadn't talked about why his father had chosen not to go into mining, and how his father did not want his son to go down that path. And so they started having these conversations, and he said, I really feel close to my dad. I've never actually talked to him about things. And then he would sit, he'd crack open a beer, they would Zoom from across the other side of the world. And he goes, I feel like we've really bonded. And it's really beautiful because we've spoken about things and about the family and things that we've never, ever just even brought up in conversation, and had some really deep moments. And so that in itself was wonderful. And so these little vignettes, he'd record some that he felt were okay to share. Then I learned it's really based around his grandfather's journey and the Lofthouse Colliery disaster, because his grandfather, not to give too many spoilers, and this doesn't give too much away, but he was the one man on that team that didn't go down the mine that night because he had a bronchial issue, and the doctor said, you're not allowed to go. And then he lost all his friends that day. And it's about how he kept going, his grandfather, against adversity, against men's mental health, about overcoming the challenges of going back into that dark place where he'd lost every single colleague and comrade he'd ever known. And it talks about the light and the shade and the dark. And so those snippets were shared with me on a tape because Craig's dad is not a writer. And the bits he did write were almost like broken pidgin English, but really beautiful and sweet. And there were some little golden moments in there that have made it into the script. And then it was really about me crafting what I knew, how I grew up, what the stories my grandfather told me, because he was heavily involved with Arthur Scargill. Because if you grew up at that time in England, it was Thatcher against Arthur Scargill, and it was a political atom bomb. So you couldn't escape that. You couldn't escape if you grew up in a working class town, in a mining village, you had a connection to somebody who went down that pit and toiled for hours and who lived their life with great camaraderie, but also a lot of fear and hard work.
Wow. Oh, you've tapped into it a little bit, but what kind of emotions did it bring up for you while you were writing this? Because it's so closely tied to like joy and trauma in your life.
I am going to share you with something that was such a huge hit. We actually came up with the idea to share the 10 Northern Commandments. And the 10 Northern Commandments is something I wrote based on all the things I remember my great-grandfather, my grandfather, and my grandmother, and even my nana and my mum telling me. It was like what Northerners kind of live by. I'm actually just going to show you a little thing here. It's a little teaser. We came up with these amazing posters, and it's the 10 Northern Commandments. And I'll just give you a little cliff note. It's things like, number 1, thou shalt not go around killing folk is number 1. Number 2, thou shalt not use the Lord's name in vain. Number 3, thou shalt not nick out from thy neighbour. And the list goes on. And each one of these 10 Commandments, we wrote them over a glass of wine, and we were crying and belly laughing and talking about all the times some situation had happened. And these were the 10 Commandments that we went, this is our childhood. And this was the structure and foundation of how I wrote Dust, because everything, this whole man's journey comes back to every commandment on this page. Oh, I get tingles. It just is such a beautiful thing, but it's what the foundation and the structure of the story that I went away to write feeds into. So it kind of gave me a little bit of a parameter.
That is really cool. We're just like digging into this. It's just like we're mining in and getting all of that good stuff out of there. So you've talked about a little bit about how audiences are reacting. And you took the show to Edinburgh last year, yes?
No, we're actually going this year.
Oh, first time. Okay.
Exciting news. You can be a world first. I can announce, Lauren. Here you go. This morning we confirmed we'll be at the Pleasance in Edinburgh, which is amazing, in Bunker 1. We have a 2 p.m. time slot, which is wonderful for people to come and watch the show. But it was the venue I really, really wanted. I was manifesting that. And so I was so thrilled to get that email from Johnny this morning to say, you're locked in. So 22 shows, which I'm very excited about, and just excited to get over there and enjoy the journey.
Yeah, that's very exciting. So it's interesting because it's a very very specific place, right? So you're in Yorkshire, you're telling the story in Australia. What kind of change are you hoping for people to experience when they've seen Dust?
Craig talks about it at the end of the show because he's very emotional. Each show takes so much out of him. This is a one-man show, 55 minutes. He never leaves the stage. He never really comes up for air. As soon as he says the first word, you are on this journey. And so I think that the emotion behind it and the story that is told, and now that we've had, obviously feedback, and we actually had miners from that town come and watch the show, it just transports you into that world where it's authentic, it's real, and people feel and resonate with it. So to go back to Yorkshire is a dream, but it's ultimately to keep the memories of the miners alive. I think I've become very aware of my own mortality, and I have my children. My children are now 18 and 20. but I want to share these stories. They came to see Dust and were like, wow, we never knew. This is where we come from. This is why we have sayings and mannerisms. And this is why we've got determination and grit and humor and heart and soul. And this is who you are, Mum. This is where you came from, because we've grown up on the other side of the world. So, you know, it's important that mining is now becoming as obsolete as the men who mined it back in the day. And for me, I want to keep their memories alive. I want to pay tribute to the lives that were lost and do that as respectfully as possible, and give something where people can come together and share that experience, but share it with that next generation. And we've had so many schools, which has been beautiful, come to us and say, can we bring school groups? I've even had a media class say, we want to make a film out of this. You know, we want to come watch the show and tell stories. And it's about how do we tell those verbatim stories authentically, do it with the deepest respect, pay homage to the miners that are no longer with us, but also do it for those families that would love to come and see this and go, I remember that. I remember my dad. I remember my grandfather. And what a beautiful piece of history that can be for generations to come, even when I'm not here. Maybe the play in 100 years might be picked up and performed. Imagine that. How cool would that be, that it has a life that lives on beyond me and the theatre company, but somebody will pick up and read and go, that's what it was like back in those times, and we need to be respectful and remember that.
It's the power of storytelling, right? And the passing down of stories and of family and tradition and where we came from.
And the 10 Commandments.
Yeah, your 10 Commandments. Dude, you need to print those off and sell those. Do you sell them as merch at the show?
What was really beautiful, back when the whole process started, I put in for a Creative Australia Match Lab grant. I worked so hard on that grant, and I did not for 1 minute think we would ever get the grant, but we won. We got the grant, and I got flown to Melbourne, and I learned how to be philanthropic in our endeavours, to see this as a long project because it's part one of a 3-part trilogy, and really stepping out of my comfort zone. And so we created these posters, and we did sell them, and we sold every single one, and they were limited editions. We signed them on the bottom. This is number 2, Craig has number 1, other people who came have the others, so they were all like part of the 2025 season. And I've been into people's homes, people have messaged me, people met me after the show going, we need one of those posters, how do we get one? And so we only had 50, so out there in the world, there are 50 first limited editions of those posters, but it helped us. Everyone who bought a poster was that extra little bit that went into the fund to get us to Edinburgh and then hopefully back to Yorkshire, because that's the plan, is that I'm hoping a producer will come and see the show and say, we are going to take you on a 2027 tour. And we're already in negotiations with quite a few theatres, which is really exciting, but to get it out to as many people as possible, because I think people will genuinely love it and enjoy it and be proud of it.
Right. I'm kind of curious, like, how do you think people in Yorkshire are going to respond to see their town like told on stage, right?
We did joke that maybe Craig can't play this in Yorkshire. Maybe he's too Aussie now, even though to people here he sounds quite Yorkshire. I'm like, we might just have to immerse you back in there for 2 weeks with people who go, you don't sound Yorkshire anymore, mate. You've got to get back into it. You sound way too ochre. But I think that we were very fortunate that many people from Yorkshire came to see the show. People who actually came from Wakefield, and they were just, their response was that they were blown away, and that made me feel comfortable that I think it would resonate. And miners came to see it and they said it was authentic, it was on the money, it was like we just relived that whole time of our lives. And I met this beautiful woman who came to see the show. She's actually a silk judge in Adelaide. And she said that she worked on the humanitarian rights and was working with miners at that time. And she said, I'm not quite sure how you did it, but it was like reliving that point in time. Even I don't know quite how I did it. Maybe it was just tapping into some strange part of my brain. So that's given me the confidence that I think when we do go back, that we have been respectful, that it is authentic. We've told those stories as authentically as we can from what we know from our ancestors and the stories that were passed down. And we may come across a challenge where somebody doesn't agree with anything we've said or done, but I hope that I've done my research, that I've spoken to many people authentically, and from feedback so far, I think we've done well.
Yeah, that's so exciting. So you've mentioned that you have a part 2 and 3. Is this going to be I don't know if you can give it away. You may not be able to. Is it like a continuation of the same story, or is it different people, different perspective? What does this trilogy look like?
Yeah, it's a really, really great question. Each trilogy stands alone, but is connected, and there is a connection to mining and mining towns in each part of the trilogy. I did have somebody approach me, I don't know if I can say this out loud, but they're interested in maybe doing a film of this trilogy and maybe even a series of this trilogy. And if I could sum it up in a couple of words, it's, if you've seen The Crown, I don't know if you've seen The Crown on Netflix, it's kind of like The Crown for the common folk. I don't know if that's sort of, it's like the working class version of The Crown. It takes you through like a century of what it was like to grow up and be in Wakefield, in North Yorkshire, in Yorkshire, living through mining experiences, growing up and just experiencing what life was like, both growing up through mining, during the miners' strikes, but then the aftermath and what communities are still feeling and going through because of what happened in the 80s and the 90s and where we find ourselves today.
Wow. That sounds really exciting, because I think sometimes we get fascinated with the cream of the crop, right? The royals and all of that. And you forget that most of us are not that.
We definitely don't live like that. That's right. And I think we're all fascinated with, the top 2% or 1%, that seems to be who everybody aspires to be. But I'm really proud of growing up in Yorkshire. I'm really proud of coming from a working class background. I'm really proud of, like I said before, about being instilled with the fact that people can take away your money, they can take away your home, but they can't take away your education, and they can't take away your moral compass, which in some strange way is these Northern 10 Commandments, that you live your truth, and community is so important, and the people around you. And so I will always be proud to be Yorkshire. I will always raise that Yorkshire rose and that flag, the white rose, but I will also be very proud to be Australian, because I think we are a multicultural society, and apart from our Indigenous ancestors, and we meet on Ghana land today from where I call from, that, we've come from many different places, and it's about learning those experiences and learning our histories and being proud of our ancestry and telling those stories. So that's really important to me.
Oh, that's so exciting. Well, I'm going to ask you advice, because, you talked about your fundraising, and what advice do you have for folks as they're putting together shows? I mean, I'm coming halfway across the world, and you're about to do that as well. So you go to Edinburgh, it's very expensive. It can be quite overwhelming. Like, I don't know, give us maybe your top little tips and tricks or advice for fundraising or applying for a grant.
Yeah, I have completely changed my thought process. If anybody is listening to this and wanting to go for a grant, I would say overcome that fear. People often think, I don't want to ask for money, or feel really uneasy about stepping into that philanthropic space. When I got flown to Melbourne and was working really closely with Creative Australia, they really changed my mindset. And I'm so grateful for that, because they made me feel valued, and the story I was telling had value within the arts. And that we weren't begging for money, we weren't asking for handouts, we were actually providing an artistic pathway for people to come and enjoy that experience, to feed their soul, to enhance their world and their daily experience in life. And so it really changed my way of thinking, because I felt almost like mouse-like, going, I don't really want to speak out and ask for people to come to my show and do those. And now I'm like a lion. I'm like, come see this. This will make you a better person. It will feed your soul. And go and see other artists. Go and step outside your comfort zone. Go see as many people as you can or afford to. And if you have trouble, come and see me. I'll slot you in at the back of my show. I just want you to have that experience. And that for me is about changing that perception of the value of art. It's a service in a way that allows people to be taken and transported on a journey, and we should never undervalue the arts in our community, because it gives so much. And I think politically it's always been a struggle, and we have to fight to keep that alive, because I think if anything, COVID showed us the importance of connection, community, artistry, because who did we lean on the most during that time? Apart from obviously the medical services, but it was really about keeping people buoyant and knowing that we can share those stories and we're not alone. And for me, that's what theatre does, is you walk into that room and you're not alone, you're sharing the story.
Absolutely. Yep. It's the power of live theater. Well, it has been so wonderful to talk about this production. It just gets me even more excited to see it. I hope I can snag a ticket because you guys are selling out fast. But I do want to ask you my last question, my famous last question, which is, what is your most interesting or awkward Fringe interaction? You've been doing Fringe for a long time and you already had a great story of meeting your creative partner, but tell me another fun Fringe story that you have.
I mean, definitely, I just think it was really, really beautiful to have the miners come to the show, and they had lived this experience, and to see someone come out and hug me and just hold me and be in that uncomfortable space of connection, that was really, really beautiful, and I'll never forget that. And it was heartwarming and transformative and just really grounded me as to why we were here, because sometimes I look back and go, how did we get here? Why did I write the story? What was the motivation? Sometimes you forget why it even started, because it's gone on such a huge journey already within 12 months. So I think that human connection for me, and having a miner say to me, wow, just wow, and just hug me and cry, was just beyond. And I think that'll stay with me forever, which is really beautiful.
Yeah. It's like, as artists, we don't always know how people receive our work. So not very often that we know how it impacts them, unless they're brave enough to come up and tell us, or come up and hug us with tears in their eyes. It's like gritty guys coming up and being like, yep, you got me.
Here we go. There's a heart in there. There's a bit of mush behind that facade.
There's lots of mush behind that facade. We know that. They're not fooling anybody.
And I'm so excited. So you're going to be over in Adelaide, Lauren?
Yeah. I'm bringing my show. It's called Holio, and I'm going to be at Goodwood. And yeah, I'm really excited. So I'll be performing for the first few weeks that I'm there, and then I'll stay an extra week and I review shows and that kind of stuff. So
wonderful. Well, my door is always open. I feel now that we got to be on a Charlie name basis, not just Charlaina, which is also my official name, but my professional name, Mikasa Sukasa, from Texas to Adelaide. You'll always have a place to lay at, Lauren.
Oh, thank you. Well, Charlie, thank you so much for joining me today on What the Fringe. It's been just an absolute delight to have you here today.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me. And it's wonderful to feel I've got a friend in Texas whenever I'm in distant waters.
Absolutely. You sure do. Well, friends, Dust is going to be playing at the Adelaide Fringe the 21st of February through the 7th of March at the Mill. And then making the big announcement, it's going to be playing at the Edinburgh Fringe at the Pleasance from August 7th through the 30th. And then they're going to be at the Round Melbourne the 9th and 10th of October. And we are speaking into existence Yorkshire 2027. Come on, producers. We want you there. You can learn more about Yellow Brick Theatre on their website at yellowbricktheatre.com. And you can keep up with the theater on Instagram at Yellow Brick Theatre Company and on TikTok at Yellow Brick Theatre. And keep up with Charlaina on Facebook at Charlaina Thompson. All of those will be linked below for you. What the Fringe is produced and hosted by me, Lauren Hance. This episode was edited by Ben Ellis of Renowned Media, and those sweet tunes you hear provided by Paul Snyder of Orchestra of Sound. And our logo was designed by Ruby Arnold of Ruby Makes Things. What the Fringe can be found on your favorite podcast platforms and on YouTube. So be sure to hit that subscribe button so you can stay in the know when new episodes release. Keep up with What the Fringe on Instagram at whatthefringe_productions and find us online at whatthefringeproductions.com. Look, Fringe friends, you can't hide it from me. I know that you are that actor warming up in the hallway, talking to the wall, repeating
5 flying Frenchmen flying fashions to France.